Taipei 03:15 a.m. Sirens shriek across the capital, but they come too late. On the horizon, hundreds of silhouettes darken the sea. Landing craft, amphibious assault ships, missile destroyers. Above them, streaks of light tear through the night sky. Hypersonic glide vehicles smashing into radar stations, cruise missiles hammering runways, cyber attacks blacking out power grids. The world wakes to the unthinkable. China has launched the full-scale invasion of Taiwan. But this is not the end of the island. It is only the beginning of a war that will pull the Pacific into fire. For across the ocean, American carriers are already turning east. This is a simulation of how such a conflict could erupt and how it might end with Taiwan's independence hanging by a thread. For years, the Taiwan Strait simmered like a fault line. Beijing called it unfinished business. Taipei called it sovereignty. Washington called it strategic ambiguity. Everyone knew the tension could one day boil over. No one expected the boil to come so suddenly. It began with silence. Just after midnight, Taiwan's air defense network flickered, screens glowing with static. Operators banged consoles thinking it was a glitch. It was no glitch. Chinese cyber units had already flooded systems with malware, corrupting targeting algorithms, delaying response times, and blinding radars in key sectors. Then came the first wave. Dozens of DF-17 hypersonic missiles arced over the strait, diving at impossible angles. In seconds, half a dozen long-range radar sites vanished in fireballs. Patriot batteries, confused by false signals, launched too late or not at all. Airports in Taoyuan and Hualien erupted under waves of cruise missiles. Power grids flickered, then failed. Taiwan's famous Silicon Shield, its chip factories, went offline as emergency systems cut electricity. On the coastline, fishing boats scattered, but among them lurked shadows. Stealthy Type 726 landing craft and Type 075 amphibious assault ships. They disgorged wave after wave of armored vehicles and marines onto Taiwan's western beaches. Helicopters whipped across the night, ferrying troops over defenses that had not yet mobilized. Beijing's plan was simple: shock and paralyze. Strike so hard and fast that Taiwan would collapse before allies could react. State media announced the operation as reunification. But to those on the island, it was an invasion, raw, brutal, and relentless. Taiwan fought back. Coastal artillery spat fire into the strait, knocking out some landing ships. Mobile missile batteries hidden in the mountains lit up. Sinking destroyers caught too close. Fighter pilots scrambled from surviving runways, dodging swarms of Chinese J-20 stealth fighters. Some never returned. Others managed to claw precious kills before being overwhelmed. Still, the scale was staggering. Within 12 hours, Chinese forces had secured multiple beachheads. Red flags fluttered where once there had been quiet fishing villages. Drone swarms buzzed overhead, striking command vehicles, disrupting reinforcements. Civilians huddled in basements as the ground shook with bombardment. Taipei itself braced for siege. But Taiwan was not alone. Thousands of miles away in Pearl Harbor, Guam, and Yokosuka, the United States Navy had already received the call. Satellite feeds confirmed the landings. The order was clear: mobilize the Pacific Fleet. USS Ronald Reagan, USS Theodore Roosevelt, and USS Carl Vinson turned into the wind, launching fighters and loading Tomahawk missiles. B-2 bombers prepped on Guam, while stealth drones were ferried onto remote Pacific airstrips. Submarines slipped silently beneath the waves, heading toward the strait like wolves scenting prey. Washington faced its moment of truth. For decades, U.S. policy danced around strategic ambiguity, but ambiguity ends when missiles fall and beaches burn. A message flashed across encrypted lines: the defense of Taiwan begins now. For Beijing, this was expected. For Taipei, it was salvation. The invasion was not going unanswered. The stage was set. The world's two largest militaries were now on a collision course across the Pacific. And Taiwan, bloodied but unbroken, stood in the crossfire, hoping rescue would arrive before the island fell. The first 24 hours of China's invasion stunned the world. But by the second day, the Pacific roared awake. The United States had entered the fight. Carriers on the move. From Yokosuka to Guam, American carrier strike groups surged eastward like steel storms. USS Ronald Reagan, USS Carl Vinson, and USS Theodore Roosevelt formed the vanguard. Each ship carried nearly 100 aircraft, F-35C stealth fighters, EA-18G electronic warfare jets, and squadrons of Super Hornets. Escorting cruisers and destroyers bristled with Tomahawk missiles and Aegis radars, eyes and teeth of the fleet. For the first time in decades, U.S. commanders prepared for a pure naval battle. No counterinsurgency, no asymmetric skirmish. This was blue water war against the People's Liberation Army Navy. The Battle of the First Island Chain. China knew the Americans were coming. Dozens of DF-21D carrier-killer missiles rolled out from hidden launch sites along the coast. Recon satellites tracked the U.S. carriers, while long-range bombers armed with cruise missiles circled inland skies. The Taiwan Strait became a chessboard, every move lethal. As the U.S. fleet approached the First Island Chain, the defensive arc running from Japan through Taiwan to the Philippines, China struck first. Waves of DF-21Ds lifted into the sky, their warheads streaking toward the carriers. But the Americans were ready. Aegis destroyers launched Standard Missile-3 interceptors in rippling salvos. Radar screens lit up like constellations, interceptors colliding with warheads at the edge of space. Not every missile was stopped, but enough were. The carriers lived pushing forward. Air superiority contest. In the skies, the real duel began. U.S. F-35Cs lifted from carriers, slipping into the stratosphere with stealth profiles. From the mainland, swarms of Chinese J-20s screamed to intercept. Dogfights erupted over the strait. Modern battles fought at supersonic speeds with missiles that locked on before pilots even saw each other. Taiwanese F-16Vs joined in, darting from hidden runways and makeshift highways. They fought not just for survival, but to keep the skies over Taipei contested. Every Chinese transport shot down slowed the invasion. Every U.S. strike fighter that survived brought reinforcements closer. Electronic warfare crackled across the spectrum. American Growlers jammed Chinese radar. Chinese cyber units tried to blind U.S. satellites. In one surreal moment, a squadron of drones clashed with another, AI against AI, algorithms dueling for dominance as their human operators watched the sky fill with fire. Submarines in the deep. Beneath the waves, another war raged. American Virginia-class attack submarines, already prowling the strait, launched torpedoes at Chinese destroyers escorting landing craft. Explosions churned the sea, sending shockwaves across beaches where Chinese troops fought to expand their foothold. But the PLA Navy struck back. Type 093 nuclear subs hunted in packs, forcing U.S. commanders to constantly reposition. Sonar screens flickered with phantom contacts. Depth charges rolled into the black water, detonating in blossoms of pressure. The Pacific, silent for decades, once again echoed with the sound of submarine warfare. Taiwan holds the line. Onshore, Taiwan fought desperately. Cities became fortresses. Anti-ship missiles hidden in civilian trucks roared from alleyways, hitting Chinese transports unloading supplies. Volunteer fighters held barricades, while engineers sabotaged bridges to slow armored columns. Despite brutal bombardments, Taipei remained defiant. American cargo planes, flying low and fast, parachuted supplies into safe zones. Weapons, food, and medical kits kept resistance alive. Taiwanese commanders sent out a message: "We will not surrender. Hold the skies. Hold the seas." The turning point looms. By the third day, both sides had bled. China held footholds along Taiwan's coast, but they were fragile, supplied by thin lifelines across the strait. The U.S. Navy had suffered losses, a cruiser sunk, several aircraft destroyed, but the carriers still floated, and their planes still flew. Now came the question neither Beijing nor Washington could avoid: escalation. China's generals urged massive missile barrages on U.S. bases in Guam and Japan. American commanders debated striking launch sites inside China itself, a step that could ignite full-scale war. Taiwan, battered yet standing, waited for the hammer to fall. Would the island be crushed beneath the weight of two giants? Or would its survival ignite a reversal no one thought possible? The next phase would decide more than Taiwan's fate. It would decide the balance of the Pacific century. The third day of war over Taiwan began with silence, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. On the horizon, the ocean shimmered with the movement of fleets converging on a single stretch of water. Dozens of Chinese destroyers, frigates, and amphibious assault ships pressed forward, their decks crowded with armor and troops. Behind them, aircraft carriers of the People's Liberation Army Navy launched wave after wave of fighters. Overhead, the contrails of missiles stretched like scars across the morning sky. The American carriers had closed the distance overnight. Hidden by the vast Pacific darkness, they emerged at dawn, launching squadrons of F-35s that climbed into the stratosphere. Their mission was simple and brutal: break the Chinese spear before it could pierce the heart of Taiwan. The air above the strait became a cauldron. F-35s locked missiles onto J-20 stealth fighters, while Taiwanese F-16Vs darted beneath them, loosing sidewinders at transports lumbering through the clouds. Every minute, another machine went down in flames, some vanishing into the sea, others erupting over the shoreline in thunderous fireballs. Beneath the waves, submarines played their deadly game. American Virginias and Seawolf-class hunters crept along the ocean floor, stalking the Chinese landing fleet. When the order came, torpedoes streaked into the dark water, slamming into the hulls of Type ZU-51 amphibious transports. Explosions lifted steel and fire into the air. Men and machines hurled skyward before sinking into the unforgiving sea. Chinese submarines fired back, forcing American captains into desperate, evasive maneuvers. Depth charges thundered, echoing across the strait, turning the seabed into a graveyard of steel. Above ground, Taiwan's defenders clung to survival. The beaches were charred, littered with burned-out vehicles, but the defenders fought on. Truck-mounted anti-ship missiles fired from city streets, striking Chinese frigates offshore. In Taipei, civilians filled sandbags and barricaded intersections while air raid sirens screamed without pause. The city had become a fortress, its people refusing to bend even as missiles rained down. Then came the pivotal moment. China launched a saturation strike, a massive wave of DF-21D and DF-26 missiles aimed squarely at the American carriers. Dozens of warheads cut across the sky, falling toward the Pacific like meteors. Aegis destroyers responded in perfect coordination, launching interceptors in a wall of fire. The night sky lit with collisions, blossoms of flame where missile met missile. Yet not all were stopped. One warhead plunged through the defenses and struck a U.S. cruiser, ripping its hull apart in a single blinding detonation. The loss echoed across the fleet, a reminder of how fragile even the most powerful navy could be. But the carriers endured, and their counterattack was devastating. Waves of F-35s and Super Hornets swept across the strait, striking the clustered Chinese landing fleet. Precision bombs smashed into decks, tomahawks roared from launch tubes, and the sea itself seemed to burn as ship after ship erupted in flames. Amphibious transports that had survived the journey across the strait now sank within sight of Taiwan's coast. Thousands of Chinese troops, once poised to storm the island, found themselves struggling in the water as the invasion faltered. For the first time since the war began, the tide turned. Chinese commanders, desperate to salvage the assault, ordered reinforcements forward. But every kilometer brought them deeper into the killing zone of American submarines and bombers. B-2 Spirits launched from Guam cut through the skies undetected, releasing bunker-busting ordnance onto missile sites along the coast. Airfields erupted, silos crumbled, and the command network trembled under the pressure. Taiwanese forces seized the moment. Counterattacks surged from hidden positions in the mountains. Artillery thundered against weakened beachheads, tearing apart what was left of the invasion force. Civilians in coastal towns, emboldened by the sight of Chinese ships burning offshore, rose to resist occupation troops with whatever weapons they could find. The island was bleeding, but it was still standing. As night fell, the strait was littered with burning hulks, shattered aircraft, and oil slicks stretching for miles. The Chinese assault, once planned as a swift and unstoppable reunification, had stalled in chaos and ruin. The Americans had paid dearly, but the carriers still sailed, their decks alive with fighters refueling and rearming for the next strike. The battle for Taiwan had reached its climax. The Dragon had lunged, but the shield had held. Now the question hung heavy over every command post and every capital on Earth. Would Beijing escalate even further, risking all-out war, or had the moment of truth already passed? The fourth day dawned over the Taiwan Strait in eerie silence. Smoke still curled from the shattered hulks of ships, drifting like black scars across the horizon. The sea, once crowded with armadas, had become a graveyard of steel. For hours, neither side fired a shot. The dragon had struck with fury, but its claws were broken. The shield, battered and bloodied, had not shattered. Taiwan still stood. Inside Beijing's command bunkers, panic grew. The landing force, meant to capture Taipei in 48 hours, had collapsed into chaos. Supplies never reached the beachheads, reinforcements drowned in burning waters, and air superiority was gone. Generals argued in desperate tones, urging escalation, even strikes on Guam and Japan. But the political cost loomed. Missiles had been wasted, fleets had burned, and still the island refused to fall. To double down now risked open war with the entire West. Washington, too, weighed its choices. The Pentagon had proved it could hold the line, but every admiral knew the danger wasn't over. Another wave of Chinese missiles could come at any moment. Yet the White House saw something more. An opportunity to break the illusion of Beijing's inevitability. With cameras rolling, the president declared that Taiwan has not been conquered. Taiwan will never be conquered. The words rang like cannon fire across the Pacific. On the island, survivors crawled from shelters, their eyes raw from smoke but filled with defiance. Beaches were littered with wreckage, yet Taiwanese flags still waved above government buildings. Soldiers held their rifles with blistered hands, exhausted but unyielding. In Taipei, church bells rang at dawn, a signal not of surrender but survival. Civilians poured into the streets, chanting for freedom, chanting for life. The Americans moved fast to secure the advantage. Cargo planes roared into makeshift airstrips, unloading fresh weapons and supplies. Engineers rushed to rebuild runways, giving Taiwanese pilots the chance to retake their skies. Drones swept the strait, hunting for survivors and stragglers. Submarines patrolled like silent sharks, ensuring no new invasion fleet could cross unnoticed. Across the globe, allies lined up. Japan announced that its forces had intercepted Chinese aircraft near Okinawa, standing shoulder to shoulder with Washington. Australia pledged to send destroyers into the Pacific. NATO declared that the defense of democracy does not stop at Europe's shores. The world, once doubtful, now rallied around Taiwan. And Beijing? The silence from the regime was deafening. Propaganda channels called the invasion a partial success, but citizens whispered the truth. Their army had been bloodied, their navy humbled, their missiles intercepted by the very fleet they had sworn to sink. Rumors swirled of power struggles within the party, whispers of accountability, whispers of blame. The dragon's roar had turned into a whimper. For Taiwan, the victory was not absolute. Too many dead, too many cities scarred. But it was survival, and survival is its own kind of triumph. The island had faced the storm and endured. What began as a night of fire ended as proof that democracy could withstand even the heaviest blows. And so the world entered a new era. The myth of Chinese military inevitability was shattered. The United States proved it still commanded the Pacific. Taiwan proved it was not a pawn to be sacrificed, but a fortress of freedom. And Beijing was left to ask itself a question it had never dared to consider. What happens when the island refuses to bow? The war for Taiwan ended not with a treaty, not with surrender, but with endurance. Taiwan remained free. The American carriers still sailed. The dragon retreated into its lair, wounded, watching, waiting. The future was uncertain, but one truth was clear. The Pacific would never be the same again. Disclaimer: this video is a fictional simulation. It does not depict real events. It imagines how such a conflict could unfold, to explore the risks and consequences of modern warfare.